Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. And joining me in the studio this evening are our regular contributors, Sam Payton from the Save Loch Lomond campaign. Welcome back to the programme, Sam.
Hi, Gordon. Thanks for having me back.
Okay, and of course, our other regular contributor, Chris McCusker from the Socialist Group of the SNP. Welcome back to the show, Chris.
Good evening, Gordon.
Okay, so I'm going to launch into the coronavirus update straight away, as usual. And as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 510,812 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 490,756 were confirmed negative. 20,056 were positive. There are 68 new confirmed cases of COVID-19, and there are 0 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. Now, this, of course, is an underestimate of the number of cases, with not everyone with the virus displaying symptoms, and not all of those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 257 were in hospital last night, 2 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection remains at 2,494. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 41,477 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 12 since yesterday. And this number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. Now, at this point in the programme, before we start on our next news story, I'd just like to remind you that you can participate in the programme via Twitter by using our own hashtag, Scotland at 7. That's Scotland at AT and 7, number 7. So if you want to comment on anything while we are live, please feel free to do so. And now to our first story this evening, and Scottish judges have allowed Al Megrahi's appeal to proceed. November the 24th has been set as the date for the start of the posthumous appeal hearing against the conviction of Mr Abdelbasit Al Megrahi for the Lockerbie bombing in 1988. Announcing the decision today, Lord Justice General Lord Justice Clerk Lord Menzies said that the court had authorised Abdel al-Basit al-Megrahi, the son of the deceased Abdelbasit Mohammed al-Megrahi, to institute an appeal on behalf of his father. He has allowed the appellant to found an appeal on additional grounds which did not relate to one or more of the reasons contained in the Statement of Reasons by the SCCRC for making the reference. It has allowed ground 1 of the appeal to be argued, the ground of appeal in relation to no reasonable jury could have returned the verdict that the court did. And it's also allowed ground 2 of the appeal, non-disclosure, to be argued, but also includes the Crown's failure to disclose CIA cables as set out in Operation Sandwood. Importantly, it is continuing consideration of part of our appeal on the new public interest immunity certificate, and that is protectively marked documents which the UK government maintains should remain classified. The court will now appoint special counsel for this purpose to represent the appellant. The special counsel will have clearance from the security services and is entitled to see confidential information and will appear at private hearing where we may not attend. He or she must not disclose any of the confidential information to our legal team except with the permission of the court and where permission is given in accordance with such conditions. Now, commenting on the decision, Amir Anwar, the lawyer for the family of Mr Al Megrahi, said, "Today was an important milestone for the Megrahi family on the road to try and establish the verdict against their father was a miscarriage of justice. There can never be a time limit on justice." Okay, Sam, let's have your reaction to this story. Now, we are all old enough to remember the events of 1988, and we all remember the trial of Mr Al Megrahi. But for a posthumous, a posthumous appeal to clear the man's name, there must be strong feeling among his family that his name really needs to be cleared, despite all the time that has gone past.
I think at the end of the day, justice has got to be seen to be served, and if people believe that he never received a fair trial to start with, and then the family do have that right, And if I remember correctly, because it has been quite a long time away, so forgive me if my memory doesn't serve me correctly. There was kind of quite a lot of questions at the time of the court case. And even from some of the victims' families, there was a lot of questions that were never really answered. So I think it's
Sam,
there's enough time.
There was one other thing, Sam, I think that viewers need to be reminded of, and that was Mr. McGrahy, in order to be released on compassionate grounds, he had to withdraw his initial appeal.
That's right.
And so he never got a chance to make this, and I think maybe Mr. Anwar is trying to redress that.
Yeah, probably, because it was a shame because he never got a chance to clear his name or prove his innocence when he was alive, because you're correct in saying that he had to drop his appeal in order to be released on compassionate grounds, so he could be with his family, because obviously he had terminal cancer. So yeah, I think it's only fair. We see this happening quite a lot over years in the justice system, where technology has changed and new information comes to light, and obviously with the security services, if there's been information withheld at the time, this has all got to be re-examined. So it's only fair that this is going ahead, and I hope everything does get looked at forensically and the right decision is made at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Coming over to you, Chris. Now, we mentioned the point here that that there was evidence in this written statement that we've received today from the court from Amar Anwar, I beg your pardon, that there were certain items of evidence which were not disclosed during the trial, these CIA cables. How important do you think this new information must be?
Well, I mean, it could be potentially important to the defence of the McGrahy family. I've read about this. Obviously, I follow Amir on Twitter, and he was saying that the reputation of Scottish law has suffered both home and internationally because of the widespread doubts about the McGrahy conviction. Everybody knows he's a dogged and tenacious character. So if he's taking this case on, he will obviously want to see that, first of all, justice for the family, but also he would want to see Scots law being upheld and not tainted in any such way, shape or form.
Chris, I wanted to ask another question here. If Mr. McGrahy's family are successful and Amar Anwar manages to argue successfully that the McGrahy verdict was not safe, does that then mean that there is going to be another trial or another investigation into the bombing? Or is that even feasible after so much time?
Well, I personally, I'm not a lawyer or anything connected with the prosecution or whatnot, what have you. That is something that we may possibly see in time. I'm actually a wee bit uneasy at discussing this because my uncle was actually in charge of the special branch investigation at the time of the Lockerbie disaster, and he's now retired from the police, but I wouldn't be too surprised if he's still involved in it in some sort of way, shape and form.
Okay, well, listen, thank you, Chris. We're going to move on to our next story now. Police Scotland has now been granted powers to break up large house parties. Restrictions on social gatherings will come into force from tomorrow, Friday, the 28th of August, making it an offence to breach a coronavirus COVID-19 guidance by having large house parties indoors. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, made it clear that the move, which was to be reviewed every 3 weeks, was necessary to ensure socialising can continue in a safe and responsible manner, ahead of an expected rise in indoor gatherings during the autumn and winter months. Reports from local outbreak incident management teams suggest that the increasing number of house parties taking place against the guidance pose a major risk of COVID-19 transmission and could present high-risk super spreader environments. Taking responsible action now can help to protect families, communities, schools and local businesses from having to return to the stricter lockdown measures necessary to contain any virus outbreak. In changes to travel restrictions, it was also announced today that travellers from the Czech Republic and Jamaica will be required to self-isolate at home or another specified address for 14 days on arrival in Scotland from 4 a.m. this Saturday, due to a significant rise in the number of cases of coronavirus. At the same time, Cuba will be added to the list of destinations where travellers will be exempt from the requirement to quarantine. Now, Sam, again, I'm going to come to you first on this. I'm not certain whether you've experienced anybody holding indoor or large house parties, but they certainly do appear to be happening. Is the First Minister right to be taking this action just now?
First of all, I would just like to say, if anyone's having a big house party, they've not invited me. Where is the house parties? Because I've not seen them. Am I at that age now that we're not cool enough to be invited to? It's a hard one, isn't it, Gordon? Because people have been locked up and we're entering a kind of new way of living. And it is difficult. And I do feel it for the younger generations, because they're not the freedoms that we had. So I do feel it for them, and I can understand why they are tempted to have these house parties and such. But however, I can see it from the other side of the coin, where Nicola Sturgeon, in her capacity as First Minister, has got to she's having a responsible role, and she's got to be responsible for, all of us and our health.
So she has to. You think she has to take these unpopular decisions as well as.
She has to, and this is the problem, and so I can see two sides of the coin, and it's a difficult one. But I feel sorry for Police Scotland, because I've got enough to be dealing with without having to be policing house parties in this way as well. So it's going to be quite tough.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Chris, your reaction to these new measures today. So we've got a change in the travel restrictions for people coming in and this new power to the police.
Well, I'm a wee bit disturbed about the Czech Republic being sort of like closed down. I was actually looking at a wee city break or something like that. But unlike Sam, the last party that I attended was Woodstock back in '67, but that's neither here nor there. In the grand scheme of things, they've got to be taking responsible action now to help the families in the light of what happened in Aberdeen. If they're serious about trying to protect schools and business and trying to get back to as near normal as we possibly can, then any sort of fiscal lockdown measures, are going to have to be possibly used in order to curtail any virus outbreak. So short, sharp shock treatment, I think, is needed. But I also think that people need to be responsible themselves and, just not have, wild house parties at this moment in time.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. So we're moving on now. And homelessness statistics have also been published today, commenting on the publication of Homelessness in Scotland 2019 to 2020 statistics. Housing Minister Kevin Stewart said, "Today's figures are a reminder of why we are committed to ending homelessness and rough sleeping. They do not reflect the progress made to dramatically reduce the numbers of people sleeping rough during the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the start of the crisis, we have provided more than £1.5 million to third sector partners to accommodate those experiencing homelessness in hotels. This builds on our £32.5 million investment to support local authorities to prioritise settled accommodation for all. Our priority is now to prevent anyone from ending up back on the streets or in unsuitable temporary accommodation. To help us achieve this, the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Group recently made a series of recommendations, which we will respond to fully next month. In the interim, our partners have closed night shelters to explore alternative self-contained options for the coming winter, with a view to phasing out such shelters completely in the long term. Additionally, as previously announced, we also intend to extend emergency legislation designed to protect people who are renting from evictions. Now, let me come first of all to you, Chris, just for a change in the order here. This surely is excellent news, and continuing to work on the problem of homelessness to try and basically rid the country of that problem.
Well, I wouldn't exactly call it excellent news because the homeless situation in Aberdeen and Kevin Stewart's constituency is, I know for a fact, is one that is ongoing. It's been exacerbated by COVID-19, and there's quite a lot of agencies, the likes of Shelter Scotland, that have had to curtail their activities due to COVID-19. You wouldn't be surprised to hear me say that, I personally think that Scotland needs to have more control over immigration and migration. Thus, therefore, we can actually take the decisions that matter to the immigrants who choose to come to Scotland to live here and to work here, so that we can properly take care of them. That is a direct jibe at Priti Patel over the fact that the UK government have the blood on their hands with regards the recent sad demise of Miss Begum. So, what
Mercy
actually,
Baguma, I think you mean, Chris. Yeah,
Baguma, yeah.
I know the names are similar.
What actually gets me is the fact that the UK government cannot look after homeless people, never mind refugees.
Yeah.
And if we had the powers ourselves, then I know for a fact that we could do a hell of a lot better.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, coming to you, Sam, briefly for your reaction to this. I notice it mentions that they have an ambition to close night shelters completely in favour of sort of more self-contained accommodation. Do you think this is going to be a step forward for people who have been rough sleeping? And I know homeless shelters can be pretty depressing places.
Yeah, the thing is they need to find alternative measures, and Chris is correct in saying that, if we had independence, we could. I agree completely with Chris that we could do a lot better at looking after the most vulnerable in our society. The thing is, their ambitions to close the night shelters, but they need to have something in place before they do so. And also, as well, they need to go back to the reasons why people become homeless. And yes, when it comes to people in rented accommodation, there needs to be more legislation to protect tenants in rented accommodation. And also, as well, when there's relationship breakdowns too, because there is people who become homeless due to relationship breakdowns and they've got nowhere else to go. And we need to have a look at that, because at the moment that system is failing a lot of people as well. So yes, we need to kind of go back to basics, go back to the causes. But yeah, we need to. The night shelters are not the answer. We know that. They're basically they strip people of their humanity, which is not very good. We need to be building on people's humanity, building on their confidence, empowering people again, because they've been stripped of all these basic rights. So it's a team effort. It's a society effort, and as an independent country, we could do that better without the UK government.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Okay, moving on now, and population and migration statistics have also just been published. Responding to the population and migration statistics published by the National Records of Scotland today, the Economy Secretary Fiona Hislop has said, as these statistics starkly illustrate, while Scotland's total population is the highest it's ever been, 5.46 million, we face a number of challenges. Against a backdrop of a record low in the birth rate, Scotland's population is ageing, and it is welcome that people are living longer. Many local communities have experienced population decline, particularly those in rural areas and parts of the west of Scotland. With all of Scotland's population growth predicted to come from migration, the impact of Brexit means that in the future we may not have enough people of the right ages in the right places. The cornerstones of a strong economy are productivity, participation and population. We need to grow our population to ensure that we have sustainable, vibrant and resilient communities and drive improvements in inclusive growth. The Scottish Government has established a ministerial population task force to address the population concerns by making communities across Scotland attractive places to live, work and to bring up families and move to. Chris, over to you first of all for your reaction to this. So, the Scottish Government has recognised that there is going to be a population problem, and they are starting a task force to look at ways, presumably, of protecting the immigration that's needed to provide that.
As welcome as it is, you can call it a new department, you can call it a fact-finding task force, or whatever. To be honest with you, as long as we don't have the powers over immigration, then I personally think it's just going to be a talking shop. We can wish for what we would like, but unfortunately, until we actually have the powers in order to get what we like and do what we want to do, then I think that we're always going to be pushing the cart up the hill. It is welcome the fact that that we're actually being proactive at this moment in time and trying to redress the issue. But the salient fact remains is the fact that if we do not have the control over immigration and migration, then there's not an awful lot that Scotland can do or say in order to try and bring immigration and migration to Scotland. We can bang on the door all we like, but you only need to look back at what happened when Kirsten Hare was waxing lyrical about the fact that she managed to convince Dominic Raab to give her another 15,000 migrant workers in order to pick fruit. But the actual fact is that the 15,000 migrants wouldn't be enough for Somerset, let alone her own constituency in Angus. So, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. Well, right, okay, I get the point, Chris. Thank you for that. Coming to you, Sam, now, I noticed that in this particular announcement today, the Scottish Government's establishing a ministerial task force. And what they're saying is that they are going to make communities across Scotland attractive places to live, work, bring up families and move to. And that, taking up what Chris has just said, seems to be about all the Scottish Government can do as long as its hands are tied without these powers.
Unfortunately, Chris is right. They've not got any powers in immigration or anything, so our hands are tied. Yes, in the rural communities, we are needing more people to be living there, and we need more facilities for younger families and such. And it's, for anybody that lives in rural Scotland, it can be quite a tough life. But the other problem is as well is a lack of, I don't know so much about now, but in some places there can be a lack of suitable, affordable housing, even to rent. So that forces people to move out of these rural communities. Also the lack of adequate jobs. So again, that forces people to move more towards the kind of central belt of Scotland. So we need to look at all this. But again, without our own powers, our hands are tied.
Okay, Sam, so you would advocate a more sort of holistic approach. Okay, that's terrific. Let's move on now to our next story. Now, Ed Davey has been elected the Liberal Democrat leader. Ed Davey's been elected the Liberal Democrats' fourth leader in 5 years today, with the former minister on the Tory and Lib Dem coalition pledging to rebuild a party that has seen its support fall away and ended up with just 11 MPs when with then leader Jo Swinson losing her seat to the SNP. In 2010, the Lib Dems went into coalition government with the Conservative Party under former Prime Minister David Cameron, a decision which many pollsters believe that voters have not forgiven them for. Mr Davey, who held ministerial roles in the 2010 coalition government, beat his opponent Leila Moran by 42,756 votes to 24,564. He said that he had heard the voices of the voters who have turned away from his party in the last 3 elections. Now, Chris, let me come to you on this as a political commentator. Ed Davey's hearing voices, because I can see that's making you smile already. What's your response to this?
Well,
how much impact will Mr Davey make, do you think?
The next thing he'll be coming out telling us that he can be the new Prime Minister.
Oh, surely not.
Well, I mean, that was a famous one by Jo Swinson.
Yes.
Fair play to him. What can you say about the leader of the fourth smallest party in the whole of the country?
Yeah.
Where even what relevance do they have if the SNP actually dwarfed them about 4-1?
Yes.
What have they got? About 11 MPs?
Yes, 11, I think, is the total.
Yeah, and
only 2 in Scotland, I believe.
Well, yeah, but some of them
I might be wrong on that. Sorry.
They're the Change MPs. They're not. They migrated over from Labour, then one from the Tories, stuff like that. They're not really a credible party. They're not a relevant party. They might be relevant in England at some point in time. When Jo Swinson was in charge, she had a chance to work with Jeremy Corbyn and actually close the Tories out. So the reality that we're in at this moment in time could have actually have been a different reality to what we're actually.
So you're suggesting that if Jo Swinson and Jeremy Corbyn had been able to form a coalition, that you could have shut the Tories out?
Yeah, definitely. But now there's the chat that Ed Davey would be warming to the idea of doing a deal with Keir Starmer. But for Scotland, it's too little, too late. I would possibly suggest that Keir Starmer is more aligned to Ed Davey's type of politics than what Jeremy Corbyn was to Jo Swinson's.
Okay.
But from my point of view, I think Leila Moran has been actually quite, a steady and forthright MP, and it's a shame that her membership didn't think that.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. Coming to you, Sam. A couple of years ago, I think I once compared the change of leadership of the Liberal Democrats in terms of the impact they made to a mouse parachuting into cotton wool. How much impact do you think Ed Davey could make to the fortunes of the Liberal Democrats?
Oh, I love that, Gordon. That's great. I'm just on Twitter at the moment, and I've just seen Snoozy Susie saying exactly what I was thinking. Ed who? Which says it all.
Ed who? Another Ed.
Yes, that gave me a giggle, because the thing is, they're changing leadership. It's all the kind of these parties at the moment, the Tories, even Labour have had a few change of leaders. They seem to be, changing leadership so quickly, which
Yeah.
shows that they're not stable. And that's the thing. They're not showing any stability within their own ranks. So if they cannot show any stability within their own ranks, how can they show stability towards the electorate? The electorate's going to be voting for them, and that's what people need to start thinking about. Whereas, whether it's the Greens or the SNP, there's a stability there. So this is the thing with these parties. There is, as again, I'm going to keep saying, there is no stability, and it shows even in the senior ranks. So, but yeah, I do like that. Ed Who, that says it all. I don't think I can add to that one.
All right, Sam, thank you for that. Moving on. Okay. Now, an MP has called the UK government handling of the job retention scheme complaints simply appalling. Alison Thewliss MP, the SNP Shadow Chancellor, has poured scorn on the UK government's handling of complaints relating to the job retention scheme, the JRS, and has accused ministers of threatening the long-term viability of many businesses across the country. The JRS, announced in March, was designed to provide grants to employers to cover 80% of staff wages, up to a total value of £2,500 per person per month. However, the government is facing mounting criticism that over 5 months since its inception, many companies and firms remain locked in intractable disputes with Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs over their eligibility. In some instances, employers have attested that mistakes made by HMRC in the weeks and months preceding the coronavirus crisis have led to their being unentitled, including access codes not being issued, customer callbacks not being completed, and a string of other issues. In one high-profile case in Thewliss's constituency of Glasgow Central, the Sub Club, a stalwart of Glasgow's nighttime economy, has been unable to access support for employees due to filing returns that were late by a single day, a situation owing in large part to the HMRC's handling of their case. Chris, I'd like to come to you first on this story because there have been criticisms, obviously, of this scheme. How bad has it been? I have the information here on a few cases, but is it as widespread as it would appear?
Well, I've actually got to fess up to the fact that I was listening to BBC Scotland today.
Wash your ears out with soap.
And they were actually interviewing some guy that owns a couple of nightclubs in Glasgow and stuff like that. And I sympathise with these moaning up until a point.
Was he blaming the Scottish government, Chris, by any chance?
Yes. He was blaming the Scottish government. And, at that point, I was drinking a Greg's coffee and it nearly went all across my dashboard. As I was shouting at him, the fact that we don't have the pecking powers in order to, borrow money and stuff like that, just to keep his nightclubs afloat. That is just a small but important point when you start to try and take a thinly veiled swipe at the Scottish government. But what he was actually alluding to was the fact that the amount of money that these clubs actually bring in. And I was chatting to Sandra White as well, and she was telling me, her constituency is predominantly Glasgow City Centre.
Yeah.
And she was saying that the amount of wealth that the Glasgow nightlife brings in is, it's fairly substantial.
Yeah.
But does that wealth actually outweigh the health of the city? I think people should be a wee bit careful at who they actually try to take a swipe at. It's very easy for BBC Scotland to entertain these chancers that can come on and take a swipe because the BBC will lap it up and and obviously agree with the poor sod.
Okay.
But, it is what it is.
Right, Chris, thank you for that. Sam, I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to you on our next story. We're having to move on because we've got such a packed programme tonight. And we're moving to Belarus now. Belarus opposition says that the Russian reserve police force is unacceptable. Responding to comments by Russian President Vladimir Putin that a reserve police force had been set up at the request of the Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko and was on potential standby, the Belarusian Opposition Coordination Council said it was unacceptable for Russia to have set up armed forces of any kind to use in Belarus. The Opposition Council said in a statement it regretted the force had been set up at Lukashenko's request and said that it violated international law. Meanwhile, the SNP Shadow Defence Secretary today criticised the Tory government for condemning the authoritarian Belarus regime in public while simultaneously helping to strengthen its military power, and urged Ben Wallace to stop assisting countries violating human rights. In March, the Ministry of Defence announced that the British Royal Marines had shared essential experience and expertise with Belarusian forces in joint exercises, with images of British troops training alongside Belarusian forces having also been advertised on state media. Stuart MacDonald MP has written to the UK Defence Secretary asking for details of this bilateral military cooperation and a list of all operations which have taken place since 2011, when the UK Tory government sanctioned Belarus for violations of international electoral law standards and international human rights laws. Right, Sam, because I missed you on that last round of questioning, here we have the Belarusian opposition pointing out that having a police force basically created by a neighbouring country violates international law. What on earth is the Belarusian president thinking of, having a police force formed outside of his own country?
Gordon, he's desperate. He's losing power and he is grabbing at last straws, final straws. It's absolutely disgusting. It's just unspeakable, and there's so many different things I can say about this, but in terms of the Tory government, that doesn't surprise me, and we should be angry about that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the Tory government say in public. They have been facilitating this monster of a man. Yeah, okay. I'm going to pass this one on to Chris, because it's actually, it's absolutely vulgar in so many ways.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Chris, it just dawned on me while I was listening to Sam that the only reason Lukashenko would possibly do this is if he feels that he doesn't have control of the situation with his own forces, surely.
Well, obviously the first question you've got to ask is the legitimacy of any other sort of like backup police force. And also you have to ask, did he just wander down to the Labour Exchange and put a card in the window and say, what did the police officers... It's laughable to think, as Sam said, it's, the desperate act of, a desperate person trying to cling on to power, and to try and sort of like show himself some relevance. But,
Chris,
back to... Sorry.
Chris, I was just going to say, we highlighted there the involvement of the British government in exporting arms and military equipment and military expertise to the Belarusian state at the same time as criticising them for human rights issues. Surely there's a double standard here.
Well, that's what I was just about to go on and talk about.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. I preempted you. I do apologise.
I was going to go back to Stuart MacDonald's comments. But you're 100% right, Gordon. And Britain have got a litany of these kind of things, where they sell arms to the likes of Saudi Arabia, and then, 2 days later they turn around and say, "Oh, isn't it shocking that they're beheading people?" It's, it is what you get with a government which is bereft of leadership and clarity.
Okay.
It wouldn't surprise me if the UK government, with all their U-turns, actually supplied a couple of regiments in order to try and keep the peace.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you for that, Chris. I've just received a note here. We'll come back to this in a moment. We do have another story that's just come in. But first, before that, the New Zealand mosque shooter has been given life in prison for wicked crimes. In New Zealand today, Christchurch High Court Judge Cameron Mander sentenced white supremacist Brenton Tarrant to life in prison without parole for killing 51 Muslim worshippers in the country's deadliest shooting, saying that the sentence was not enough punishment for these wicked crimes. It was the first time a court in New Zealand had sentenced a person to prison for the rest of their life. The judge said that Tarrant had shown no remorse and that no matter how long he spent in prison, it would not be long enough to atone for his crimes. Your crimes are so wicked that even if you were detained until you die, it will not exhaust the requirements of punishment and denunciation. Now, as I said just a moment ago, we've just had a breaking story come in. Beg your pardon? Okay. I beg your pardon. We're moving. Okay. We're going to continue with another story actually on white supremacists, coming on from the story in New Zealand. White supremacists and militias have infiltrated police across the United States. White supremacist groups have infiltrated US law enforcement agencies in every region of the country over the last 2 decades, according to a new report about the ties between police and far-right vigilante groups. In a timely new analysis, Michael German, a former FBI special agent who has written extensively on the ways that US law enforcement have failed to respond to far-right domestic terror threats, concludes that US law enforcement officials have been tied to racist militant activities in more than a dozen states since 2000, and hundreds of police officers have been caught posting racist and bigoted social media content. The report notes that over the years, police links to militias and white supremacist groups have been uncovered in states including Alabama, California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Louisiana, Michigan, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, Virginia, Washington, and West Virginia. Police in Sacramento, California in 2018 worked with neo-Nazis to pursue charges against anti-racist activists, including some who had been stabbed, according to records. And this summer, German's report says that an Orange County Sheriff's deputy and a Chicago policeman were caught wearing far-right militia logos. In Olympia, Washington, an officer was photographed posing with a militia group. And in Philadelphia, police officers were filmed standing by while armed mobs attacked protesters and journalists. Concern about alleged allegations between far-right groups and law enforcement in the US have intensified since the start of the protest movement sparked by the police killing of George Floyd. This week, police in Kenosha, Wisconsin, faced intense scrutiny over their response to an armed white man and militia groups gathered in the city amid demonstrations by Black Lives Matter activists and others over the police shooting of Jacob Blake, a black father of 3 who was left paralysed after being shot in the back. On Wednesday, Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old who appeared to consider himself a militia member, had posted Blue Lives Matter content and was arrested on suspicion of murder after the fatal shooting of 2 protesters. Activists in Kenosha say that the police there have responded aggressively and violently to Black Lives Matter demonstrators while doing little to stop armed white vigilantes. Police also reportedly let the gunman walk past them with a rifle as the crowd yelled for him to be arrested because he had shot people, according to witnesses and video reviewed by the news agency. Now, this is shocking stuff, a story of what seems to be widespread police involvement with the far right. Sam, let me come to you. Let me come to you. This seems to be a rise in far right extremism and white supremacism all over the world at the moment. But this particular report seems to be very damning. It cuts across so many different states in the US.
It's actually very, very terrifying, with the rise of the far right. But this is what happens when you start to divide communities, and you start to target the most vulnerable in communities, and you start blaming, lack of jobs on other races and so forth, when it's nothing to do with that. It's to do with people, the entitled, to try to keep their positions, and they set everybody else against each other, and the blame gets put at the most vulnerable instead of where it should be, which 9 times out of 10 is the government's.
Yeah, of course, Sam, in New Zealand, they've actually jailed this man for the mass shooting of 51 people. And he was accused of, I think it was 60 other counts of attempted murder. So, I mean, if he had succeeded, he would have killed over 100 people, just one man.
Yeah, it's unthinkable. But, it's great. And it's fantastic that New Zealand, the judge in New Zealand has taken that stance. But unfortunately, right around the world, especially in America, we are seeing news reports of people like Trump and our own politicians of the UK government, Boris Johnson and things like that, who are constantly ridiculing and being really nasty about other people, and they are fueling this hatred amongst fellow human beings, and they have to take responsibility. But the problem is, these people are absolute, I'm going to use the word psychos. I don't know if that's the correct description, but they're doing it deliberate because it serves their purposes for power, for everybody to be fighting amongst themselves. And, while you've got these right-wing leaders around the world, it doesn't matter if you've got a country who have very progressive and have very progressive views, then if people are going to be listening to that, through social media, on the news, and then reading it in papers and things, and they are attracted to that, you are going to get it. But again, it's all about education, isn't it? But it's absolutely vulgar.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam, for that. Chris, very briefly, if you would, your response to these stories of, I think we would call it white supremacist terrorism this time.
Well, I mean, you can add fascism into that. You can add the rise of the far right.
Chris, do you agree with Sam's take on this, that a lot of it is to do with basically white middle-aged politicians actually stirring this up and encouraging people to believe that this kind of behaviour is acceptable?
To a certain extent, yes. Sam obviously points to Trump and to Boris Johnson, and when you see people in high authority using language like war and using the throwback superlatives of war, it's easy to see how some right-wing nutter can, just actually take that all on board and, create chaos and mayhem. We have to remember, it wasn't so long ago, and I can't remember her name for the life of me, the Labour MP who got murdered back in 2016, I think it was.
Yes.
That was fueled by right-wing hate and fascism, because the person done that viewed the MP in question and the party as being too far left-wing.
Okay, listen, Chris, I'll need to stop you there. We're really packing them in tonight, so I'm going to move on to our next story, and we'll spend just a short time discussing them. Our next story this evening is about improving the A83 road's resilience. An appraisal of 11 options to improve resilience of the A83 Rest and Be Thankful is now underway. Potential options are being considered as part of Phase 1 of the second Strategic Transport Projects Review. And in parallel to this, a dedicated project team is being established to undertake more detailed environmental and engineering assessments as well as stakeholder engagement. This process will support the publication of recommendations for a preferred route corridor with alignment options in the spring of 2021. Work will begin on the next phase of the catch pits in September. So let me come to you first, Sam. We know that the Rest and Be Thankful suffers frequently from landslides caused by the heavy rain in the west of Scotland. How important is it, do you think, to the people, the local people and their economy for this road to be made safe? Briefly, if you would.
Yeah, no problem, Gordon. It needs to be done, and it should have been done a long time ago. So I hope this task force of people get their heads together and sort something out and come up with a plan ASAP.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. Chris, again, hopefully if you could be brief in your answer, how important is the A83 and creating a safe corridor for people travelling through the West Highlands?
Well, I've got to agree with Sam that it should have been done 10, 15, 20 years ago. Had they planted trees on the higher embankment, that could have soaked up some of the water that runs down that. So, and in hindsight, it's always a great thing, but it has to be addressed. It has to be addressed soon.
Okay, Chris, thanks very much. Now, before we move on to our last story, okay, I beg your pardon, we will come to this item in a moment. Okay, and now to the Louisa Jordan Hospital, which is providing healthcare training. More than 700 healthcare students and staff have now undergone essential training at the NHS Louisa Jordan as the facility continues to support NHS workforce in Scotland. Following an announcement last month that the hospital would be used to provide large-scale clinical training, Hall 5 has been transformed into a dedicated skills education hub, complete with audiovisual technology, support equipment, immersive simulation pods, and dedicated spaces for technical and non-technical healthcare training. The National NES Clinical Skills Managed Education Network is provided leadership and its mobile skills unit as part of the hub. In the first 6 weeks, 733 people across NHS boards, royal colleges and universities have now received vital training on the site. And plans are now in place for approximately 600 people to be trained at the Louisa Jordan each month. Chris, if you would, briefly comment on this story. Good news, I think the Louisa Jordan is being used, even though it's not being required, obviously, for COVID-19 because of the effectiveness of the government's approach.
First of all, I'll say, thankfully, it's not been required in the fight of COVID. But secondly, I welcome this, obviously, from a trade union point of view, that nurses can receive training, basically on-the-job training.
Yeah.
And it's also, training within the actual hospital setting. It has to be welcomed, and I think it's a great initiative.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Sam, what's your reaction to this news tonight?
I'm exactly the same as Chris. The end of the day, grateful that it was never used for the intention it was set off for. However, it's fantastic. It's getting used for training, and at the end of the day, they may as well use it. All that money was spent, and it's all been set up. So it's fantastic to see it going to be getting utilised.
Okay, thank you, Sam. And now finally, I shall get to this item of breaking news this evening. And it's just come to our attention that the veteran Glasgow MSP Sandra White is standing down in 2021. The Glasgow Kelvin SNP MSP Sandra White has informed her local constituency association that after long consideration she's going to stand down at the Scottish parliamentary elections next year. Chris, as a political activist yourself, does this come as a shock to you, or do you think that's part of a general trend of sort of older members of the SNP hanging up their gloves?
Well, there is that, but hopefully Sandra won't mind. And when I tell the viewer that actually indicated to me last year that think about hanging up her full hat, I mean, Sandra's obviously, I think it was last year, year before, she had a family bereavement. And she is right to want to enjoy herself and stuff like that, want to enjoy her retirement. She has been quite influential in my political reawakening, shall I say. She's been very supportive of the
Yeah.
socialist group. Always very interested in the trade union group, and I really hope to see her in the background of independence.
Chris, I know, sorry to cut across you, Chris, I know that you have an interest in the plight of the people of Palestine. I understand that Sandra White also shared that sort of compassionate view.
Yeah, Sandra, again, as I say, she was always, I'm thinking about years goodbye, she would always be coming up to me and asking, what's the Friend of Palestine group getting up to these days, and and she was bringing things to my attention, on those issues, on trade union issues, and also socialist issues as well. She's an absolute firecracker. I love her to bits. And the Scottish Parliament will be, a wee bit worse off experience not being there.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Coming to you now, Sam. Now, Sandra is one of the, if not the longest serving MSP that I know of. Anyway, she has been in the Parliament since its inception in 1999, I believe.
Yeah, I was just on kind of reading up on it. I've never been fortunate enough to meet Sandra White. I wish her all the best in her retirement. And it's sad to see so many experienced MSPs standing down and not going for re-election. We are losing a multitude of experience there, which is a shame. And for Sandra and all the other ones that are taking the decision to stand down, there is going to be some big shoes to fill at the next election. And I hope whoever is elected in their places are able to fill those shoes with the same compassion and professionalism that all these MSPs that are standing down have had.
She is also quite famously, as well as supporting the people of Palestine, has also been a stalwart of supporting the people of Catalonia as well. I understand. I believe she says that she, although stepping back from frontline politics, is planning to continue her support for both causes.
Well, I think you find, Gordon, once an activist and a campaigner, you're always an activist and campaigner. And you probably find that with her standing down and taking a back seat, she will be there. She'll still be campaigning. She'll still be fighting for people. So I'm sure we wouldn't have heard the end of Sandra, and I hope not. She said she's been there. She's been a member of the Scottish Parliament since 1999. So I don't think she'll be disappearing very quickly.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. If it was in her gift to give peerages, she might have been one of the very first to receive one then, by the sound of it. No peerages, Chris. I promise I was only using that as an example. Anyway, we've just about come to the end of our programme this evening. So, as usual at this time in the evening, it's my habit to ask you if you'd like to become an official supporter of Broadcasting Scotland and actually support us financially to produce more programmes. If you'd like to do that, you can do so by following the instructions on your screen now. broadcastingscotland.scot/register when you look us up on the internet. That's it from Scotland at 7 this evening. I will be back again on Monday, and that's it from me. I will see you on Monday. Thank you both to my guest, Chris McCusker, and to Sam Payton, and from all of us here at the studio in Cowcaddens, a very good night to you.